There was a younger man who lived in Miami for a while. His name was Mendelssohn, and he took upon himself a project of re-typesetting the Shas. That was making the same Seder of Shas, but retyping it and making a new print of Shas. He was going to do that. He actually, in Tovshin Nun Vav or Tovshin Nun Zayin, he started doing it, and he even made a sample of the beginning of Masechta Bava Metzia, and he put in the Gilyon on the side of the Gemara that he was printing. He even put in the Rebbe's beer and the Shnai Merzin, the Sefer that came out with the Rebbe's beer and Shnai Merzin. He put it into that. That was just a sample of what he was going to do by reprinting the Shas, the Gemara, Rasha, Tosfos, everything would be a new print. The Peil Mamish, he didn't do much, it didn't work out, but this is what his project was. So around Tovshin Nun Gimel, I think it was, but it definitely was after the Rebbe had the stroke already. When he was starting to think about this project, he comes over to me and he says, since he knows that the Rebbe wanted that a lot of Sforim who are printed in Rasha ACS should be reprinted in blocked letters. And we see Taka, the Likutei Torah, other Sforim which were printed originally in Rasha ACS, the Rebbe wanted it to be reprinted in blocked letters because it makes it clearer and it makes it easier to learn. And the Rebbe always wanted that things should be easier to learn. So the Rebbe wanted these things. So he tells me, so he thinks when he's going to start reprinting the Shas, he's going to make the Rasha in blocked letters rather than in Rasha ACS. So he asks me, what do I think about it? I think it's a good idea or not. So I told him, I think that even though everything else that Rebbe wanted it should be blocked letters, but I think when it comes to print Rasha, I don't think that it's right to change it and not print Rasha, which we call Rasha ACS. Even though Rasha ACS doesn't mean that Rasha wrote in these ACS, in these letters. It was because the printer who printed Rasha originally used these letters. That's why it's called Rasha ACS. But nevertheless, since by Yidden it's known as Rasha ACS, I don't think it's a good idea to reprint the Rasha and Gemara with printed ACS with blocked letters rather than Rasha, what we call Rasha ACS. What he did was he asked the Rebbe. That was after the Rebbe had the stroke already, so the Rebbe couldn't write and the Rebbe couldn't talk to answer. But what happened was Rabbi Groner called him back and told him this is what happened. He read the Rebbe the letter that he wrote asking that he wants to make the Rasha print, the new print of Gemara with Rasha, the Rasha in not Rasha ACS but in printed ACS. So he asked the Rebbe if he could do it or not. So the Rebbe shook his head no. He shook it back and forth, no, that he shouldn't do it. And what he used to do, Rabbi Groner, that time, to make sure that he got a proper answer, he would always ask the questions both sides. So here also he asked the question the second way. Does that mean that the Rebbe wants it should stay the same way it's still now in Rashi ACS? And the Rebbe shook his head up and down, yes. In other words, the Rebbe made it very clear that he does not want that he should print the Rashi in blocked letters like this person thought. So he came back to me and he said, you were right. When you said that you don't think the Rebbe would be maskim, the Rebbe was not maskim, that he should print it in blocked letters, and that's why it never changed. The end was he never made the Shas anyway, he just started and it didn't work out for whatever reason. But the main thing I'm trying to make is that the Rebbe said not to print Rasha, in Gemara at least, in blocked letters, but keep it in Rasha ACS. B'negei Chumash, I don't know what the Rebbe would say. We don't know. Didn't ask. But the question was asked. B'negei Rasha and Gemara. We all know how careful the Rebbe was concerning the union of Hasagas Gvul. Sai between two people, a person shouldn't take away business from somebody else. Also concerning Meisdes. And this was Sai Meisdes Chabad, that one Meiset Chabad should not be Masik Gvul, should not take away something that was Shayches to another Meiset Chabad, or Meisdes Chabad Lagab other Meisdes, that Chabad should not open a Meiset if it will be Hasagas Gvul, it will be taking away from another Meiset. So I want to mention two examples concerning Miami, which I was involved, where we saw how careful the Rebbe was with the union of Hasagas Gvul. When the idea came up of opening a yeshiva gedolah in Miami, obviously I wasn't here, I was still living in New York, learning in Kollel, but when it came up by the shluchim that were here then in Miami, and they spoke to the Rebbe about it, the Rebbe agreed, and he even said he's going to send bochim shluchim, but he said on condition that there is no other yeshiva in Miami, no other yeshiva gedolah in Miami. And the Rebbe even added, not only there is no other yeshiva gedolah, there is nobody else who is at this moment thinking of opening a yeshiva gedolah. Others meaning not Lubavitch. that if there are others who are thinking and planning to open a yeshiva g'dayla, the Rebbe didn't want to open a yeshiva g'dayla. And at that time in Miami, the Yiddishkeit here in Miami was not so strong, and therefore b'pashtus there wasn't enough for 2 yeshivas. So if somebody else has a yeshiva g'dayla, or is planning to open a yeshiva g'dayla, the Rebbe said that Lubavitch shouldn't open a yeshiva g'dayla. And this is a chidush because concerning learning Torah, b'negeya to nekishal b'israbon, there's a din that there is no hasagas gvul. You could open one cheder next to another cheder. Nevertheless, the Rebbe was very careful because practically speaking, since it wasn't so developed Yiddishkeit here, but mele there would be not enough to support 2. The Rebbe was very careful and he said very clearly that he's only maskim if there is no other yeshiva g'dayla here, and there is nobody who's planning to open a yeshiva g'dayla. And when they told him that there is nobody that's planning, there's nobody that's talking about it, and there isn't one, so the Rebbe asked him that he will send shluchim and we should open the yeshiva g'dayla. And that's when the Rebbe opened the yeshiva g'dayla and sent the shluchim. Unfortunately, right after that, other people who did not care opened another yeshiva g'dayla, opened the yeshiva for bochrim afterwards. But the Rebbe's approach was that if there is another yeshiva g'dayla or others who are planning, we should not open the yeshiva g'dayla. And then there was another instance where I was involved, also something similar to this, and that will be on the next voice note. The first years when I moved to Miami, which is in the beginning of the Velamids, the Yiddishkeit wasn't so strong here, and therefore all the Fruma Yidden, all the Fruma Meistes knew of each other and were connected. And therefore, even though there is Miami Beach and there's North Miami Beach, and it takes about 20-25 minutes on the highway to go from Miami Beach to North Miami Beach, but it was all basically like one. And we all knew all the things which are going on over there. They knew which was going on here. Later on, it became so much now that it's mamish 2 separate kehillas and 2 separate places. But that time it wasn't. And therefore, there was one shtotische mikveh, which was in Miami Beach. And everybody used it. It was the only mikveh for women, and everybody used it. Miami Beach and North Miami Beach, there was no other mikveh because this was all like one. At one point, they decided to make a mikveh in North Miami Beach. And this is because already the community grew, and now they could use their own mikveh there. And there was a man that was involved, and he wrote to the Rebbe, asking for a letter. I don't remember if it was for a dinner that they were making or just a haskome, but he asked the Rebbe for a letter about building the mikveh that they were going to build in North Miami Beach. And actually, they were going to build 2 beiras, 2 places where you could tevel, and one of them would be a beir el gab beir, so it could accommodate the Lubavitchers who want after a beir el gab beir, and they were ready to do it. So he wrote to the Rebbe and asking the Rebbe for a letter. So I remember Rabbi Yomin Klein called me, and he said the Rebbe asked him to call and find out, is there any politics involved? Is this mikveh something that everyone agrees and it's fine? Or is this taking away from another mikveh? Is this a kind of asagas gvul that might be from another mikveh that's there? In other words, he didn't say these words, but in other words, if that's it, he's not going to get involved and he's not going to send any letters. As much as by the Rebbe, every time you opened the mikveh, which is something very special, and those days he would even send letters if it was appropriate, was possible. In this case, he wanted to know if this is taking away from another one. In other words, there's politics, he said, and there's someone who feel that it's wrong of them to open another mikveh, he's not going to send a letter. Lepal Mamish, I found out that there was no politics. Everyone was happy because it grew, the community grew, and therefore they were able to have another mikveh. So the Rebbe actually sent a letter to the committee that was involved in building the mikveh in North Miami Beach. But otherwise, the Rebbe wouldn't send because it would be a gather of Asogas Gvul. Harav Mordechai Mentlik, who was from the Rosh Yeshiva in 770, besides being a big Talmud Chacham, was also a real mekusher to the Rebbe. He was given over to the Rebbe B'leiv Nefesh from the first moment, from right after Yud Shvat Tov Shin Yud. And it's known that he said that the reason he never went up to be there by the meals when the Rebbe ate the Yontif meals upstairs in the second floor in the Friedrich Rebbe's apartment, he never went up. People would go up because the Rebbe would sometimes say something in the middle. He never went up. And he said why? Because the Rebbe didn't sit up front. The Rebbe sat in the same place where he used to sit by the time of the Friedrich Rebbe. So the front was empty. There was a chair for the Friedrich Rebbe, and the Ashag was on the right side, and the Rebbe was on the left side. And that's how the Rebbe sat all the years, as long as he ate there. Rabbi Mentlik said he wouldn't go up there because he can't be in a place where the Rebbe sits nishtei menom and the Rebbe sits not on top. But I want to show that the hiskashrus has also an effect on the physical body. that if you really care about the Rebbe, it has effect on the physical body. What do I mean? In the Chovs, there was a bocher, not a Lubavitcher bocher, who used to dreizach around the summer 70, but he was nebach, not well, mentally not well. And he used to say crazy things. He went to the Rebbe's house. That's what he told somebody. Now, we don't know if it was true, but he told somebody. He went to the Rebbe's house and rang the bell. I think it was in the middle of the night or a time, I don't know exactly. And when the Rebbe came to the door, he was telling her that he has tainus why the Rebbe says on the Friedrich Rebbe, Nesi Dereinu, when he is the Nossi of the door. Things like that. So one Fabrengen, I think it was a Yushvat Fabrengen, I'm pretty sure Yushvat Fabrengen, he came to the Fabrengen and he started pushing himself through between the people, all the way from the door, going closer to the Rebbe. And no one could stop him. He was pushing himself. A person in that matzah really has a special kirchas, and he was pushing through. No one could stop him, and he pushed through. He went further and further and further, till he actually got up to the bime, and he pushed himself through the people on top of the bime, till he got very close to the Rebbe. Rabbi Mentlik stood on the right side of the Rebbe, so he got close all the way to Rabbi Mentlik, and people, I don't know, somehow they couldn't stop him. And the one that stopped him was Rabbi Mentlik. He stood there with both of his hands out, and B'shum Eif would not let him go, and he pushed he wanted to walk over to the Rebbe. And he said later, he wanted to tell this to the Rebbe, why the Rebbe says, and see the rain on the Friedrich Rebbe. But he wanted in the middle of the frame and push himself to the Rebbe. And Rabbi Mentlik, with his keiches, he wasn't a giber. Rabbi Mentlik was a Chassidus Shrid, and he wasn't a giber, but he was the only one that was able to hold him back till people pulled him away, and he didn't get to the Rebbe. But this shows that the hiskashris even had an effect on his physical body. It pushed his physical strength of his body became stronger in order to protect the person from coming close to the Rebbe when he shouldn't. There were a few times that the Rebbe came suddenly Shabbos morning to 770, and whoever was there, he called them into his room, and he said a mimer for them. For instance, Shabbos Parshat Tzave, Parshat Zocher, which was Tes Oder Tov Shin Chai. Also Shabbos Parshat Achramez Gdeshim, which was Yud Gimel Ir Tov Shin Chof Aleph. The Rebbe called the people in and said a mimer. Actually, Rebbe Yael wasn't even there, and the Chazor and the Anocha had to be done without him, etc., etc. The Shabbos before Yud Shvat, Tov Shin Chof Beis, the Rebbe also came to 770, and he came early in the morning, I think around 8 o'clock. And he told the bocher that he should tell everybody who was there, should tell him to come into his room, and he's going to say a maimer. The Pale, when he came in and he said this, he saw that in the Zal, there was a minyan going on for Kriyas HaTorah. Since it's the Shabbos before Yud Shvat, everyone was having an aliyah, so you have to make separate minyanim. So there was a minyan going on of Kriyas HaTorah. So then when the Rebbe went into his room and the people went into his room, the Rebbe said, this is what they told. I wasn't there. I came mamish about 10-15 minutes later. But they say that the Rebbe said that the minyan who was by Kriyas HaTorah should go back. In other words, they heard that there's going to be a maimer. I think that's what happened. No one realized that what they're doing, and they just left the Sefer Torah. And the Rebbe said that the minyan should go back to the Sefer Torah that's there. And no one at the first moment moved. Then the Rebbe said that someone should lock the door. And again, the Rebbe didn't point at anybody specific, so no one felt the achrayas to go and lock the door, so the door wasn't locked. This is what they said over when I came later. And the Rebbe looked and waited a moment, and then the Rebbe had his chumash open, obviously to the posuk that he was planning to start the maimer with. The Rebbe closed the chumash, and he said, Heint vet ke maimer nit sein. Today will not be a maimer. And there was no maimer that morning, and from then on, this never happened. Till then, it happened a few times. And actually, Rabbi Mentlik missed the first time it happened, so from then on, every Shabbos, he would come to 770 by 8 o'clock. Every Shabbos. Just in case there'll be a maimer. And that's why Taki Tov Shin Chof Aleph, he was there by the maimer, and he was one of the people who led the Chazorah then. And he continued doing that later on too. But there was no maimer from Tov Shin Chof Aleph, the last one that was the maimer Shabbos morning before davening. Then the Rebbe wanted to do it Shabbos before Yishvat Tov Shin Chof Beis, but he didn't, and then it never happened again. But Rabbi Mentlik still kept on coming, saying just in case there'll be a maimer, he wouldn't miss it. But Lepeil, since then, there wasn't again. The third sikha in Parshas Nosei, in Likutei Sichos Chelik Ches, is from the Fabrengen of Shabbos Parshas Nosei Tov Shin Chavov. And a lot of the ha'oras of this sikha came from the answers that the Rebbe wrote to the questions that the Chayzrim asked on the Farbrengen. It was a long Farbrengen, it was a very deep, nigledike siche, and after the Farbrengen, a lot of questions were asked the Rebbe, and the Rebbe answered a lot, long answers, a lot of things he wrote with the Ksav Yad. And a lot of these ha'oras came from those minors, those answers that the Rebbe answered. So, in page 56, ha'ora 42, there the Rebbe talks about Sfiras HaOmer and Shvuas. We know that Shvuas depends on Sfira. Shvuas comes on the 50th day of Sfira. After you finish counting 49 days of Sfira, then you have Shvuas. And the question that's asked is, if nowadays the mitzvah of counting Sfira is only midirabanan, so then Shvuas that comes as a result of the Sfira should also only be midirabanan. And the Rebbe talks about it in that ha'ora. And I remember when the Rebbe wrote that inyan in the answers on the Farbrengen, there was another line that was there that for some reason didn't go into this ha'ora here in ha'ora 42. And what the Rebbe wrote there concerning this question, in B'teicha Inyonim, he wrote this loshen, V'al derech, that this is like, and then he wrote in 2 dashes, V'lei mamish, not really, but it's like the klal, that kinyan derabanan meil lederaise. That when you acquire something with a kinyan that the Rabbanon made, midaraise, that's not a kinyan. So midaraise, when you did that act, it doesn't become yours, but the Rabbanon made that kinyan. Nevertheless, if you use it for something, it will work midaraise. For instance, if you are kind of something with the kinyan the Rabbanon, and then you use that to be mekadesh isha, you might think that since the whole kinyan is the Rabbanon, so it's really only yours with the Rabbanon. And when you mekadesh isha, you have to mekadesh with something that's yours. And since it's only yours midirabanan, the kedushin should only be midirabanan. It's not like that. When you mekadesh isha with anything that you were kaina midirabanan, the kedushin is kedushin deraisa. Because after all, after you are kaina, it becomes yours, and now you're mekadesh midiraisa. So the Rebbe used that idea as a dogma to this inyan of sfira, that even though it's midirabanan, the shvuas that comes afterwards is medaraise. So he wrote these words, Val derech, the lei mamish, kinyan derabanan, which is meil lederaise. For some reason, when this became a ha'ora in Likutei Sichos, for some reason these words are not there. In the winter time of Tovshin Lamed Beis of 1972, when the Bochrim were preparing for Yud Aleph Nisan that year, which was Shnas HaShivim of the birthday of the Rebbe, the 70th birthday of the Rebbe. So one of the things that they decided, one of the achlotas, was to make a time when everyone would sit down groups and learn Likutei Sichos, learn the Rebbe's Sichos Be'iyun. And the first time it started was Zayin Oder that year, and it was very much Matzliach. Bochrim were learning, it's like a kocht in the Sichos, and ideas came, questions and answers. So at that time came up an idea, maybe we should make like a thing that would come out every week or every once in a while, to put in writing the ideas that came up throughout the learning of Likutei Sichos. And that's what happened. The first one that came out was Erev Shabbos Parshas Tetzaveh. It was called Ha'oras HaTmimim. Later on, the Rebbe actually added it should be called not Ha'oras HaTmimim only, but Ha'oras HaTmimim Va'anash. The Rebbe added the word Va'anash. And people would write, different Bochrim, people would write in Yonim weekly biurim on different sichas, kashas, trutzim, and biurim on different sichas. And the Rebbe was happy with it, as we saw that after a while there was a decision to take some of the ha'oras that were written in the weekly papers and put them into a kuntres, like into a printed, not a bound volume, but into a volume. So they prepared a volume for Chai Elul Tovshin Lamed Beis, called Kuntres Ha'oras HaTmimim V'Anash, with the collection on a lot of the ha'oras and different parshas, starting from Truma all the way to Parshas Shlach. And there was a Pesach Dover written there, given into the Rebbe, and asking the Rebbe to be Magia it, and showing him what we're doing and giving out the Skrach. The Rebbe obviously was very happy. The Rebbe was Magia this Pesach Dover. Now remember, one of the words that the Rebbe added, when it said in the Pesach Dover, that's why we are turning to Anash and the Bochrim. And these are the words that said, we should not be satisfied what we got till now, etc., etc., but we should continue and get more people involved and more and more and more. So the Rebbe added the word when it says, we cannot be satisfied with what we already have. The Rebbe added the word verashoyim. Now it reads veinenu yechelim verashoyim. We can't and we're not allowed to stop the way satisfied and stop the way it is now, but we have to continue more and add more bekamus, more beches, etc., etc. And that kutras came out, as I said, for Chayel. Then it continued weekly, and then was decided to give out another kuntras. And the other kuntras was given out a little later, and that is for the Yimei Aslichas Tovshin Lamed Gimel. And again with a short Pesach Dover given into the Rebbe. The Rebbe was Magia, and came out another kuntras, a second kuntras, with a lot of the horas that were written and printed before in the weekly papers that were given out. Now just remember that in this the Rebbe had written that it's bemis not a good idea to have a Bochrim's Chidush Torah reprinted again. Maybe you reprint from some Godel. He didn't write these words. I'm just explaining. He didn't read. It doesn't matter if you reprint some Godel B'Yisrael his Chidusha Torah a second time someplace else. But the Bocher you printed, but to reprint it again. So that's why they never gave out the third kuntras. But the Rebbe was happy. Was Magia this Pesach Dover also, and the second kuntras came out. And this all was in 770. The Ha'oresu Hatmim Vanash of 770. With time, also started Ha'oras at Mim Vanash in Morristown, then started Ha'oras at Mim Vanash also in Montreal, in Ocean Parkway. I feel in Miami we had later Ha'oras at Mim Vanash. A lot of yeshivas gave out. And Nova Torah started Ha'oras Ubiyurim, which was like similar to the Ha'oras at Mim Vanash, and goes on still now Ad Bi'el Geil Tzedek. And the Rebbe was very, very much mechavev it. And to show that mechavev it, I'll explain in the next broadcast where we see how much chivuv the Rebbe had to it. The chvivus that the Rebbe showed to the Ha'oras Atmim Vanash, or it's called Ha'oras Abiurim, but this type of kontresim that Kochzach in the Rebbe's Torah was, first of all, you would see that Friday night, when the Rebbe would come down to daven, he would come along in the Siddur. You had the kontresim of some or all, or some, I don't know exactly, of Ha'oras Atmim Vanash that came out that week, and the Rebbe would look at it. And the Rebbe would look through it during davening. Many times by Fabrengens, the Rebbe would refer to a question that was asked in the Ha'oras Atmimim, or an answer that was given, and the Rebbe talked about it. The Rebbe spoke to Reb Melech Tzvibel and Yechidus, because he was involved in the Ha'oras Atmimim Vanash of Morristown, talked about it. The Rebbe even mentioned to him that there was somebody who wrote the Rebbe a letter on a shaila, one of the sichas, which actually was in the sicha of Kisiso, printed in Chelik Yudalev, that came out in Tovshin Lamed Gimel. The Rebbe said he sent him a kuntras Ha'oras Atmimim that discuss, that the Bochrim there, or the Ingelai, discuss Pshat in that Sicha. And the Rebbe in a letter, which is printed in Likutei Sichas, Chelik Lamed Vov, page 268, which talks about that Likud and this person's question, and the Rebbe answers him, and then the Rebbe writes to him, that I'm sending you the discussions that were written by the Talmidim in this Likud. I'm sending it to you. That I hope that you will have interest in it. So the Rebbe sent him Ha'oras Atmimim, or I don't know which kuntras the Rebbe sent him. I think maybe the kuntras of Morristown. I think that's what he said to Reb Melech, but I'm not sure. But he sent him a kuntras and to answer his questions, and this was a kuntras that the Bochrim wrote. Another thing we saw where the Rebbe showed the chvivus is that Tovshin Mem Hei, for Yud Beis Tammuz, a special likud came out. Besides the weekly likud that came out, the Rebbe said to print a likud with the title Likutei Sichas from the Rebbe, and reprint there a beer on the Rambam that was connected to the Shir Rambam of Yud Gimel Tammuz of that year, Tovshin Mem Hei. And this was a Sicha that was originally printed in the likud of Parshas Mishpatim, Tovshin Mem Hei. And here the Rebbe asked to reprint it with the title Likutei Sichas, but usually on the cover of the Likud that would say the Parsha, here it says Biur Berambam Hilchas Esure Bi Reish Peirik Yud Gimel, and then another line Bishiur Hayemi the Yud Gimel Tammuz Tovshin Mem Hei. And in the Pesach Dover it says clearly that Al Pi Ha'iro of the Rebbe we're giving out the Sicha that the Rebbe said by the Fabrengen of Doesn't say which Fabrengen it was, but the Sikha that was Fabrengen of Tovshin Pashas Maseh Tovshin Mem Dalet, printed in Likutei Sichas of Parashat Mishpatim Tovshin Mem Hey. But the point I'm trying to make is that and the same liquid, in the same, together with the Rebbe, it says also in the Pesach Dover, Betur Hei Sofer. This is all part of what the Rebbe said to do. As a Sofer to this liquid, which is a beer and the Rambam of the Rebbe, Nitfasu B'Seif HaKuntres HaOres HaChodes HaLasiche, Kefi Sheheifiu B'Shaiton, B'Kaiftzen Sheinim. That as a Sofer to the liquid of the Rebbe, there are many biurim that were written in different kuntresim. And there's taka hisofi here, something, and it says where it's from. It's from ha'orasu biyurim of Olateira, it's from ha'orasu tatmimi vanash of Morristown, ha'orasu tatmimi vanash of Montreal. So the different places where it's taken from. But it's interesting that the Rebbe, in the same liquid, which is Likutei Sichas, and it says in the cover Likutei Sichas from the Rebbe said to put in a hisofe in that same liquid of things that the Bochrim wrote in these other keftzim. So this certainly shows how much chassidus the Rebbe had to these keftzim. There was a rumor circulating in 770 in the Yuds and in the beginning of the Chofs, in the 50s and the beginning of the 60s, that agents of the KGB come to the big Fabrengens. And the rumor was, that since this was not so long after the Lubavitch Chassidim escaped from Russia, Tovshin Vov, Tovshin Zayin, this is 1946, 47, the Russian government said that they will catch the people and they will bring them back to Russia. And the rumor was that they sent agents to the Fabrengens to see who's there. I remember one of the Fabrengens, a weekday Fabrengen, and this was in the beginning of the Chofs, that there was a person there that even to me he looked suspicious. I saw he pushed himself up closer to the front and he took out from his pocket, it looked like a pen, but he started snapping pictures of that pen. It wasn't really a pen. It was the size of a pen, looked like a pen, but there was a camera, which they said that this is a camera that the spies use it. Those years, this was a camera that the spies would use. And he started snapping pictures of the crowd. He didn't take pictures of the Rebbe. He took pictures of the Eilam. And he took pictures from all corners. Where he was standing, he took from the right side and the left side, and all corners to take pictures of all the people. Now, we know that many times by Fabrengen, there would be people from the outside, some of them even not from people, would come with a camera and they would snap pictures of the Rebbe. They came to the Fabrengen and wanted to take pictures of the Rebbe. But this person was not taking pictures of the Rebbe. He was taking pictures of the crowd. And it looked suspicious. Then, if I remember correctly, and I'm not 100% sure, something that the Rebbe motioned or something that the Rebbe said, I don't know. I think so, that's what I remember. And one of the Maskirim came over to, I think, Reb Zalman Gerari, and they were shushkins, they were talking, and then he walked over to him, and they got him out. They told him to leave, and they asked him to leave. I think that the Rebbe was also involved, that the Rebbe made note of it or something. That I can't be 100% sure. Maybe there are people who remember this more clearly. So I don't remember exactly if the Rebbe was involved, but I do think the Rebbe said something. I'm not sure, but then they made sure that he leaves. But the rumor was that this was an agent of the KGB, and he came to take pictures of the crowd, which he knew that a lot of these people were the ones that escaped from Russia in the years of Tovshin Vov and Tovshin Zayin. In one of the times when I went into Yechidus with my parents, so after my father spoke his inyonim with the Rebbe, then my mother turned to the Rebbe and she said to the Rebbe that she wants to ask the Rebbe for advice. She pointed at me and she said, my son, and I was there, eats very bad. In other words, I was a hard eater. I didn't eat well, and she was very worried. She asked the Rebbe, what should she do? She asked him for a bracha. What should she do? So the Rebbe said to her, so therefore, give him vitamins. And I think the Rebbe used like the idea that this will supplement what he's not eating. I don't remember the lashonos that the Rebbe used, but something like that. But the advice that the Rebbe gave is let him take vitamins, and this is like a supplement to the food that he's not eating enough. So we see here that Rebbe, besides giving brachas and eitzes and tifin yonim, even the simple thing that the woman asks about the health of her child and simple things, even for that, the Rebbe put his time in and gave advice, a simple advice, and the advice in this case was, let him eat vitamins and that will help. The year of Tovshin Chov Hei, 1965, was a special year in Lubavitch. that year there was a Farbrengen every Shabbos. Otherwise, only after the Rebbetzin passed away, in Tovshim Mem Ches, did the Rebbe start Farbrengen every Shabbos. He stopped Farbrengen in the weekdays, but he started Farbrengen every Shabbos. But till then, only special Shabbos Mevorchim was always a Farbrengen. And also if it was a special Shabbos, a special date, special Yom Pagre, or a Teresh Chedesh, and even that, not always was it like that, but many times when there was a special date on the Shabbos, there was Shabbos Farbrengen. But not every Shabbos. But the year Tovshin Chav Hei, there was a Farbrengen every Shabbos. Chav Hei is the year that the Rebbetzin passed away, the Rebbe's mother passed away, the Rebbetzin Chana, on Vov Tishrei. And because of that, the Rebbe Farbrengen every Shabbos. What happened was, Rabbi Weinberg, who used to give a Shir Tanya on the radio every Motzei Shabbos, if that Shabbos there was a Farbrengen, he would chazer over at the end of the Shir a little bit of the Farbrengen. Not only that, sometimes he would actually buy more airtime from the radio station, and he would have extra 15 minutes, which he would chazer over from the Sichos of that Shabbos the Farbrengen, or from a Shabbos before. Tovshin Chav Hei, when the Rebbe's mother passed away, Rabbi Weinberg wrote to the Rebbe, I think it was after Yontif, that he's thinking of, for the whole year, to buy extra 50 minutes of airtime right after his Shir Tanya, to say over a Sicha from the Rebbe every week, the Zeicha Nishmas of the Rebbe's mother. And he wrote to the Rebbe this, and he also wrote that he doesn't know yet where he's going to get the money from, but this is what he's thinking of doing. So on that, the Rebbe answered, when he wrote that he's planning to buy extra time on radio to say over a Sikh every Shabbos, the Rebbe wrote that this is mechazek by me, the strengthens by me the svara to have a Farbrengen every Shabbos. And in Negeya, he wrote that he doesn't know where the money is going to come from, so the Rebbe wrote he's going to pay half of the expenses. So then right away everyone knew there is going to be a Farbrengen every Shabbos. There were many Bochrim who were thinking of going for the year to Montreal to learn, were thinking whether they should stay or not. Now there's going to be a Farbrengen every Shabbos, there's going to be something special. They were thinking to go or not, but this was known that there's going to be a Farbrengen every Shabbos. And the truth is, there was a Farbrengen every Shabbos, starting from Parshas Noach. Parshas Breishis, there would have been a Farbrengen anyway. Parshas Noach, B'derech Klal, there wasn't a Farbrengen. Very few times from the beginning of the Nesiah, still that year was there Farbrengen Parshas Noach, and even those few times that it was because it was Rosh Chodesh, but otherwise there was no Farbrengen. And B'chal it was known that after Tishrei for a few weeks there's no Farbrengen. Month of Cheshvan there was usually no Farbrengens. Chof Cheshvan came out on Shabbos, then there was a Farbrengen. I don't know if always, but there was a Farbrengen. But otherwise there was no Farbrengen during the month of Cheshvan after Tishrei. So Noach, there was usually no Farbrengen. And this time there was a Farbrengen Parshas Noach. It's all because the Rebbe said he's going to Farbrengen every Shabbos. Not only that, the Rebbe started being Magia the Siches of every Shabbos Dike Farbrengen Tovshin Chav Hei. And the protim about it will be continued in the next broadcast. One of the special things that started from Shabbos Parshas Noach Tovshin Chav Hei was that's when the Rebbe started teaching the Rashas. On that Shabbos, when the Rebbe spoke, he spoke mainly on Rashi, spoke on more than one Rashi, and explained it al pi pshat. And from then on, every Shabbos the Rebbe would explain a Rashi. The Rebbe would have a Chumash on the table. I don't know if the Rebbe asked they should bring the Chumash, or on their own they brought it. It was Rebbe Sholem Yisrael Chadakov that would bring the Chumash. And the Rebbe would look into the Chumash, and read the Rashi from the Chumash, and look into the Rashi from time to time. And every Shabbos there was a Chumash laying there. And the Rebbe would explain the Rashi from that Shabbos on every Shabbos. First, the Rebbe just spoke the first Rashi and other Rashis, but it developed very soon that the Rebbe spoke on the first and the last Rashi of every Parsha. And it seemed like the Rebbe took upon himself that he's going to explain every first and last Rashi of the Parsha, which seems something very special, because by a regular person, unless he has gone through every Rashi and decided that he has what to say, how could a person take upon himself specific Rashis that he's going to speak about it every Shabbos? Maybe you won't have what to say on that Rashi that week. A male, if a person says, I'm going to speak on Rashi every week, So you'll find a Rashi that you know what to say and you'll speak. But to take upon oneself that the whole year he's going to speak on every first and last Rashi would be a Chiddush. But by the Rebbe, there's no Chiddushim. I mean, on everything he had what to say, on every Rashi he was able to explain. So he said that he would explain, he didn't say those words, but we saw that he took upon himself to explain every Parsha, the first and the last Rashi. And it is something very unique. We even wondered, when the Rebbe started this and we saw that he's going to speak on the first and last Rashi of every Parsha, we wondered what he can do Parshas Keirach. Parshas Keirach, the first Rashi is very simple. It says, Parsha Zu Yofa Nidreshes B'Medrash Reb Tanchuma. That this Parsha is explained nicely in Medrash Reb Tanchuma. What can you say on that Rashi? But when it came to that Shabbos, the Rebbe had to explain, because and everything, he's able to be Masber and Mavayer and Medayik and all the different things. But it all started from Shabbos Parshas Noach. They said that it says in Svarim that learning Rashi is a Zgula, or has to do with Aliyas Neshama. I don't know if it's true, but that's what they said, and that's why, since this was the year of Avelis, so after the Rebbe's mother, that's why the Rebbe chose to speak on Rashis. It seems like the Rebbe had in mind only to speak for 1 year on the Rashis, because he spoke the whole year, a little bit also into the next year, Tovshin Chavov, but then the Rebbe stopped. He came to a Fabrengen, one Fabrengen, another Fabrengen, and the Rebbe didn't say a Rashi. Parsha Shmeis Tovshin Chavov, the Rebbe started again explaining a Rashi. Because Mr. Waldman, who was a person who was gekocht stark in the Rebbe's Pirushim and Rashi, was very involved and would write to the Rebbe and he would get answers. So he wrote to the Rebbe asking the Rebbe that it's a very good idea, the Rebbe should continue. And the Rebbe accepted, and the Rebbe continued explaining Rashis later on also. And that's how it went on for many, many, many years. And the Rebbe explained Rashi al pi pshat many times. Most of the times he would also explain Rashi al pi sod, al pi chassidus. And the Rebbe explained that in Rashi you have definitely pshat, because Rashi says that he explains it al pi pshat, and definitely seid satira. The drush and remez, sometimes yes, sometimes not. But the truth is that in the beginning, from Parshas Noach, in the beginning, when he explained Rashi al pi pshat, it was not exactly the same type of pshat and level of pshat as it was later on. And that's why, when these sichas that the Rebbe was Magia from Parshas Noach through Parshas Vayishlach Tovshin Chavhei was printed in the Sofes of Lekutei Sichas Chelik Hei, there is a Ha'ora Klolis written before that we want to mention that the Derech HaPshat of the sichas that are printed here from Tovshin Chavhei are not in the so pashtasdik, so in simple pshat, like the Biurim Arashi of the later years, because we know that even in pshat there are many, many Yifanim. And now the Rebbe was Magia, these sichas from Parshas Noach through Parshas Vayishlach. It seemed that the plan was that the Rebbe would be Magia a whole year, all the sichas from Tovshin Chavhei, a whole year he would be Magia. The Pale, for some reason, it didn't work out, and he was Magia only up to the end of Parshas Vayishlach. Now, I don't know if the Rebbe said himself he wants to be Magia, or they asked the Rebbe and the Rebbe agreed, but it looks like that was the plan, that was what the Rebbe is going to do, that he's going to Magia these sichas for the whole year. The Pale, he was only Magia through Parshas Vayishlach, and it was printed later on, years later, in the Isofes to Chelik Hei. In the Fabrengen of Shabbos Parshas Noach Tovshin Chavhei, the Rebbe spoke a lot about the inyan of Avodas HaTefillah, about davening b'arichas. And the connection that has to Parshas Noach is because in Torah Eir, Parshas Noach, there's a maimer that starts with the words Mayim Rabim, L'yuchla l'chabes es and there he speaks a lot about Avodas HaTefillah. And he says there that even Bala Esek should daven b'arichas on Shabbos, because Shabbos they have time. So they should daven b'arichas on Shabbos, and he speaks a lot about that davening b'arichas, about Avodas HaTefillah. So the Rebbe also spoke to Shabbos a lot about Avodas HaTefillah, and he was made a lot that you should daven b'arichas. This was the Maimer Ken Sikha of that Shabbos. I don't remember if the Rebbe had a handkerchief on his hand when he said this, because we know that Rabbeim, when they would say a Maimer, they would have a handkerchief on. So did the Rebbe, when he would say a Maimer, have a handkerchief on. He even had a handkerchief on usually when he said a Maimer Ken Sikha, which means not only when he said a Maimer with a tune of a Maimer, which is we call it an official Maimer, but even when he said it in the tune of a Sikha, but it was the Maimers, so that's what we call Maimer Ken Sikha, he would also have the handkerchief on. So I don't remember if he did, but probably he did, and this was the Maimer Ken Sikha. But the way he said this Maimer Ken Sikha was more or less like a Sikha, and he said expressions which we don't usually say in a maimer, which you say in a sikha. And therefore, b'shas, this was given into the Rebbe to be magia. Now, Parshat Noach, I don't know if it was given into the Rebbe to be magia, but Lepeil Rebbe was magia, and the way it's printed, this is printed as part of the sikhs. It's mugeh, but it's printed as part of the sikhs, because the way the Rebbe said it, it was like a sikha. And the truth is, later on in the other mugeh, Til Parsha Vayishlach, many of them also, the maimer that was Ke'en Sikha went into as a Sikha. But in this one, certainly it was the signon of a Sikha. I don't mean the tune certainly was of a Sikha, but it was the signon, the style of a Sikha. Now remember two things that did not go into the official mugeh when it's the part that's mugeh that's printed in the Sikhas Chelik Hey in the Sufis, but the Rebbe said it. One of the things the Rebbe said was, when he spoke about that people should daven bariches, the Rebbe said that guckt nicht auf mir, was ich daven nicht bariches. Don't look at me that I don't daven bariches. Another thing the Rebbe said, that they used to say b'chsidim, that it's even kedai to sleep under the talis for a half hour. So other people will think you're davening bariches, and that will be made at them that they should daven bariches. Now the first part that the Rebbe said, that even though I don't daven bariches, that didn't go into the Hanocha to begin with. It was never written up, because the Seder was that when the Rebbe said such personal things like this, which is like something that it's not negeya, so they would take it out from the Hanocha. The second thing was put into the Hanocha, and if I remember correctly, the Rebbe was the one that crossed it out, this union of sleeping under the talis, so other people should think. But there was a big Seder after this Sicha or Maimer, and after this, a lot of Bochrim started davening bariches. And even though it was hard, those Shabbosim, to daven bariches, because there was a Fabrengen every Shabbos, and the Fabrengen started 1:30, so there was not much time to daven bariches till the Fabrengen. But nevertheless, some Shabbosim davening finished 12:15, so there was still time to daven bariches. So a person had to catch his place, had to go right after davening to sit down or stand wherever he is and couldn't daven bariches. But many Bochrim had Mekemes Kavuyim, set places, so they could come into the place 5 minutes before the Fabrengen. So they would daven bariches. There was a big ereris of davening bariches after that for many, many months, because the Rebbe spoke such a strong way that everybody should daven bariches. And even though this is a maimer ken sikha, as I said before, it went into as a sikha. The Pel Mamish, later on, when they gave out Teiras Menachem, were there, they took everything and they translated in Lashon Kodesh, then they separated and they already made this clearly, and the same with the Maimorim of other Fabrenges later on, that they made it into separate Maimorim. Therefore, in Teiras Menachem, this is printed as a regular Maimer, and but it says there it's al pi Likutei Sichos Chelik Hey, because it's really taken from the Sikha, the way it's printed in Likutei Sichos Chelik Hey, but essentially this was a Maimer. But I said before, the Maimer was in a style, a signon of a Sikha with a lot of divrei hiseirus, like you say by a Sikha. I heard from Reb Nochem Kaplan that when one of his children was going to get married, and the date that seemed to be a proper date was Chof Sivan, the 20th of Sivan. But he wasn't sure if he's able to do the chasana on that day, because it's known that some poskim write that you shouldn't make a chasana on the 20th of Sivan, because it's brought down in the Taz, in Erachayim, Simen Tov Kuf Samach Vov Sivkot Gimel, and in the Mogen Avram, Simen Tov Kuf Samach Ches Sivkot Yud, that there was a tonus that was established by the Rabbonim in Poland on Chof Sivan, because of the Gzeiras Tach V'Tat, because of the pogroms of Chmelnytsky, Yemach Shemei, from Tach V'Tat, from those years, and because of that, they made a tonus on Chof Sivan. And based on that, some write that you shouldn't make a chasana on that day. So he didn't know if he should make the chasana on that day, especially that his wife is a descendant of the Shach, and we know that the Shach was living in the time of Tach V'Tat, and he was involved in these inyonim, so Mele, it's more svara maybe that you shouldn't be able to do it. So he wanted to ask the Rebbe. This was already after the Rebbe had the stroke. So he spoke to Reb Yudel Krinsky, one of the maskirim of the Rebbe, and asked him to ask the Rebbe. So Reb Yudel told him a few days later that he was waiting for an opportunity when he'd be able to ask the Rebbe, when it would be clearer to him what the answer is. So he waited, found an opportunity when things were calm and the Rebbe was rested more, and it was easier to get an answer from the Rebbe. So he asked the Rebbe this question, and the Rebbe made it very clear by shaking his head that it's okay to make the chasana on Chof Sivan. And as those days, they used to make sure that they got the proper answer by asking one way and asking another way, and if all the ways fit, then it would be clear that this is the answer. So he asked another way, that means that the Rebbe says that you could make it. He said, yes, that there's no problem. The Rebbe made like there's no problem. So it was very clear from the Rebbe that you could make the chasana on Chof Sivan. Sometimes the anivus, the humility of the Rebbe, was very beilit, was very obvious. And as an example, was concerning Shabbos Parshas Miketz, which was Shabbos Chanukah, which was also the first day of Rosh Chodesh Teves in the year Tovshin Chof Tes, which is 1969. In a case like this, the halach is that instead of saying the Haftarah of Rosh Chodesh, which we normally say if Shabbos is Rosh Chodesh, but you say the Haftarah of Chanukah. And you do not say the Haftarah of Rosh Chodesh. But there is a whole discussion whether we add at the end of the Haftarah of Chanukah 2 psukim from the Haftarah of Rosh Chodesh and 2 psukim of the Haftarah of Mocher Chodesh. L'peil, the meaning by us is that we do add after the Haftarah of Chanukah 2 psukim from the Haftarah of Rosh Chodesh and 2 psukim of the Haftarah of Mocher Chodesh. But that year, Tovshin Chof Tes, the Rebbe, when he had Maftir and he said the Haftarah, he did not add those psukim. He just said the Haftarah of Chanukah. Now remember, we were standing there listening to the Haftarah and wondering what happened. How come the Rebbe didn't say it? When the Rebbe came down to the Farbrengen, there was a Farbrengen because it was Shabbos Chanukah, Shabbos Chodesh. The Rebbe, the first thing, spoke about it. And he said, first thing you have to speak about is L'Negei L'Maaseh, because something that's L'Negei L'Maaseh. And he went into a whole discussion whether the reasons why we should say these psukim, why we shouldn't say these psukim. But he said, L'Peil Mamish, since it says in the Luach Keil Chabad that you have to say it, we have to say it. And he quoted what the Frierdiker Rebbe said B'Negei the Seder, that before you do anything by the Seder, you have to look inside to see what it says you should do. It's not enough to look in Svarim that have a Shakla Vatari discussion all about it. You have to look in a place L'Maaseh B'Peil. And here it says in Luach Keil Chabad that you have to say add the 2 psukim. The Rebbe said he himself did not say it because he had a suffix whether to say it or not. But L'Peil Mamish, and he came to a decision that Al Tzasofik he shouldn't say it, but L'Peil Mamish he said, I should have said it, and this shows that you have to look up before you do something. It's not enough to know the Svarim, you have to look up L'Maaseh B'Peil in the place where it says B'Peil. And then the Rebbe went on to complain why no one corrected him. And he went on saying that there were Rabbanim even there, and no one corrected him that he should say it, that he should say those 4 psukim. And he said it that I timed already a lot of times that we have to fix things, and I said it many times and no one listens, and he went on and on and on complaining why no one fixed him, corrected him in what he did. And we were standing by the Farbrengen wondering, what does the Rebbe mean? Does the Rebbe really think that people in the crowd will correct the Rebbe when he says the Haftarah, whichever way he says it? We know that obviously, by Chassidim, you'd never correct the Rebbe. I remember there was another time when the Rebbe said something and somebody in the crowd screamed out to correct. This was by davening. And I remember afterwards, Reb Shmuel Levitin came over to him and he says, how could you do such a thing? A Rebbe you never correct, because whatever he does, he knows what he's doing and is right. So here also, how did the Rebbe expect that we should correct him? But obviously, the Rebbe said it with such sincerity, yes, that he expected he should be corrected. In other words, this showed the Rebbe's humility, that yes, that he feels that somebody should correct him. Now, we know that whatever is done by the Rebbe, it has deeper inyonim and deeper biurim and pashtas and deeper all kinds of inyonim. But the Rebbe mitzad him really complained in a very serious way that he feels he should have been corrected, that he should have added these 4 psukim. And this, we were thinking then, here shows that the Rebbe, the way he felt, that yes, we should correct him because this shows the anivus of the Rebbe. The style of the Michtovim Klolim that the Rebbe wrote before Rosh Hashanah, before Pesach, and sometimes before Chanukah and other times of the year, was that there was the Pnim, the letter itself, and then there was the Ha'aras. And many words of the letter, the Rebbe would write Ha'ara Maram Bekemes, where it comes from, and Ha'aras. But many times later on, when these letters were printed, we find extra Ha'aras called Hisof Elach Azman that was added later. Where did these Hisof Elach Azman come from? So many of them came that after the Rebbe wrote the letter, people would write into the Rebbe questions about something that he wrote in the letter. And the Rebbe would answer. So many times these answers were turned into a Sof Alach Hazman. Mainly it was usually Rabbi Mentlik, who was one of the Rosh Yeshivas in 770. He would always give a shir on the letter, a public shir in 770. And then certain questions would come up. He would write the question to the Rebbe would answer, and that would become later a Sof Alach Hazman. This answer the Rebbe answered. But sometimes it came milmaila, that means from the Rebbe himself, that after the letter was written, by Fabrengen the Rebbe would talk about what's written in the letter, and sometimes he would give over to the manichim that they should write up the teichen of what he spoke, and he was magia it, and then that turned into a Sof Alach Hazman. So I want to mention one example of such a thing, and that is the letter of Yud Aleph Nisan, Tovshin Lamed Beis. In that letter, the Rebbe writes that the Eibishter is the Etzem HaTov, he's the essence of good. Teva HaTov L'Heitiv, the nature of something good or somewhat good is to do good. So it would make sense that the Eibishter should give us everything we need without work. We shouldn't have to work for it. Then you have the best pleasure, it would seem, that you get everything very easily. But Lepel, the Pasuk says, Adam La'amal Yulad, person was created to work hard. And the Eibishter wants to work for what we get. The question is why? And the Rebbe gives the answer, because the nature of a human being is that you really want to get things that you earned, that you worked for. If a person gets something for free, that's called Name de Kesufe. That's bread of shame. And people are actually embarrassed to take something that they didn't work for. And the Gemara says that a person would rather have a little bit of his own that he worked for and earned than a lot more that he got for free. And therefore, since the Eibishter wants to give us the best, and since the nature of a person, when does he feel the best? When he earned it. So the Eibishter said, I want you to work and you'll earn it. That's what the Rebbe writes in the letter. By Fabrengen, the Rebbe spoke about it, and the Rebbe said that l'chore, since this whole reason, the reason is because the nature of a person is that he doesn't like Name de Kesufe, something that he didn't work for. Who made that nature? The Eibishter made that nature. So the Eibishter could have made the nature differently, and therefore we wouldn't have to work for it, and it wouldn't be a problem. So what kind of answer is it that the Eibishter makes us work because otherwise we don't feel the real pleasure with something that we don't really feel we deserved? Who cares? The Eibishter would have made a different nature, it would have been the same. And the Rebbe answered by Fabrengen, there's a deeper reason why the Eibishter wants us to work. Because the Eibishter wants that Kiviyochel, a Yid, should become similar to the Eibishter, similar to the Beirat. The Eibishter is a creator. A human being is a Nivra, is a creature, was created. And a creature, a Nivra, whatever he has, is Mekabel from the Eibishter. No one has anything of his own. But the Eibishter wants us to be Kiviyochel, similar to him. We should also Kiviyochel be a creator, so to speak. That's the highest madrega a person could reach, is to be close, similar to the Eibishter. So the Eibishter said, if you work for it, that means you got it, so you work for it, so you created something, so you're similar to me. That's the reason why the Eibishter wants us to work. And that's what the Rebbe said by the Fabrengen. After the Fabrengen of Yud Aleph Nisan, when the Rebbe spoke about this, the Rebbe gave over to the Chayzrim that he wants this Nekuda of the Fabrengen to be written up, and he will be magiyet, and it should be added as a hisofer to the letter. And the takit was written up, given into the Rebbe. The Rebbe was magiyet, and then it became as a hisofer to the letter. That on this ha'ore, where it says in the letter, quotes the Maimar Chazal, Odom reitze v'kaf shalei mitisha kapin shel chaverei, that a person would rather have a little bit of his own that he worked for than a lot, and 9 times as much that he got from somebody else that he didn't work for. On that, now there's a star, and this whole biur, that the reason is because Hashem wants us to become not just a Mekabel, but also close, similar Kiviyochel, so to speak, like the Eibishter, is a ha'orah to that ha'orah. And this letter is in this, and this ha'orah is printed in the Haggadah of the Rebbe, like all the other Mechtovim Klolim for Pesach. And in the last Teitzoeh, the letter is printed on the page Tov Reish Mem Aleph, and this a Sofer Lach Azman is on page Tov Reish Mem Beis. After the Fabrengen of Shabbos Parshas Tel Des Tovshin Chav Zayin, Rabbi Yoel, together with the Chayzim, wrote into the Rebbe quite a few questions on what the Rebbe said. And the Rebbe answered. Then there were questions on top of that, and the Rebbe answered again. The Fabrengens then were given out by Rabbi Galitsky and myself. We together worked on it, and we're the ones that started Hanochas Atmimim. And we were going to give out this Farbrengen of Til, this Tovshin Chov Zayin. We were working on it. But we wanted to put in the answers that the Rebbe gave on the Farbrengen, to put it into the Hanocha, to go together with the Hanocha. But since the Rebbe answered once and then he answered a second time, so we had to work on putting the two together to make it all one Hemshech. So we decided, we sat down, we worked on it, and we wrote it all out as one Hemshech, all the answers from both times, but we weren't sure we got it correct. So we decided that we're going to give it into the Rebbe, see the Rebbe should be Magiyah. The Rebbe wasn't Magiyah the Sichas then, but to Magiyah these answers. So one night, we saw Rabbi Chadakov before he went into the Rebbe. The Seder was that every night, at the end of the day's work, Rabbi Chadakov every day would go into the Rebbe, and he would stay there for a few minutes or whatever it was, and it seemed like they were discussing what things that went on through the day. And many times, then the Rebbe walked home, and Rabbi Chadakov walked along with the Rebbe, and they were talking on the way also. Sometimes when the Rebbe went with the car, Rabbi Chadakov also went into the car. But one night when we saw Rabbi Chadakov getting ready to go into the Rebbe, so we walked over to him, Rabbi Galitsky, Rabbi Avram Galitsky, and myself, and we took the paper that we made, and we gave it to him. He said, "You're going into the Rebbe, maybe you could ask the Rebbe to look this over to see if we got it right." So he went in, and we were waiting there, and it took about 25 minutes. And he comes out, and he gives it to us. And the Rebbe was Magiyah, and we put it into the Hanocha of the Sikha of Shabbos Parshat Teilos Tovshin Chov Zayin. But later on, Rabbi Chadakov told us, don't ever do it again. Because of this, the Rebbe stayed in 770 an extra 15-20 minutes. He would have gone home earlier, but the Rebbe started being Magiyah, so he stayed longer. So don't be Matriya of the Rebbe again. And actually, we didn't do it again. We just went to the regular channels that asking Shailas that was asked, and that's it. But this inyan of putting things together and asking the Rebbe to Magiyah, we did not do that again because Rabbi Chadakov told us not to do it. We know there's a whole controversy concerning a ben chutzlar, that somebody who lives outside of Eretz Yisrael travels for Yontif to Eretz Yisrael, whether we should keep 1 day of Yontif and 2 days Yontif, with many details to this halacha. And there are rumors of what the Rebbe said to this person, to that person. I just want to repeat what I heard from two separate people, that they themselves dealt with it, and what the Rebbe said to them, and I heard it from them themselves, Klei Rishon. One of them is a Rav Rappaport from Toronto, Olav Shalom. He told me that in the first years of the Rebbe's Nesias, I don't know if it was Tavshiyud Beis, Yud Gimel, or one of those years, he asked the Rebbe, when he's going to Eretz Yisrael, whether he should keep 1 day Yontif or 2 days Yontif, and the Rebbe answered him that he should not go to Eretz Yisrael for Yontif because of that, because of this Shaila. Another person I heard from was Professor Velvel Green of Sholem. He was once in Miami, and after davening, I was talking to him, and this subject came up, and he told me that once when he went to Eretz Yisrael, he asked the Rebbe whether he should keep 1 day or 2 days. And the Rebbe told him that when he gets to Eretz Yisrael, he should ask a Rav in Eretz Yisrael. And the Rebbe added, but it should not be a Lubavitcher Rav. So he went to a non-Lubavitcher Rav there, and he told him that the Rebbe told me to go to a non-Lubavitcher Rav. So, and he even told me the name of the Rav he went to it, I forgot. And that Rav told him, so I understand what the Rebbe wants is that you should keep 2 days, because many of the Lubavitcher Rabbanim in Eretz Yisrael paskin that you keep 1 day. So he says, I think that what the Rebbe meant is that you should keep 2 days. That's why he told you to ask a non-Lubavitcher Rav. Now, when the Geil Halacha L'Maisa, you can't base a halacha on these stories. You have to know the circumstances. You have to know exactly how they went and what their mind was, whether to come back and not to come back, or what their whole details were with the family, without the family. So you can't base this. But one thing you could say that these two stories can go into the equation. In other words, when a Rav looks into the subject, trying to see yes or not, and you look into the Chuvas and the Lashon Dal Rebbe, and you look into all the things, you should take into this equation, into the discussion, also these two stories. And you could discuss and say you can't bring a raya from the stories for this reason, for that reason, maybe you could say that. But it definitely should be part of the equation when you're dealing with what Lepeil Mamish a Lubavitcher should do. Now, probably there are other people who know other stories firsthand. Adrabah, they should say it so the Rabbanim could deal with it. But this is the two that I heard directly from them, that what the Rebbe told them directly. In the Chofs, I remember people were wondering when on Shabbos the Rebbe went to the mikveh, where did he go to the mikveh, etc., etc. So I remember once we were sitting in 770, myself and some of Chaverim, early morning Shabbos, 6 o'clock in the morning. We were there because, as you know, in order to keep your place, the day there was a Fabrengen, those that would come earlier would get the earlier place on the bench or whatever the shura, the line was. So people would come early. So we were there about 6 o'clock, I remember, 6 or 6:30 in the morning. Walks in Sayyid, not a Lubavitcher, and he tells us he's just coming from the mikveh in Rabbi Harlik's shul. Meir Harlik's father had a shul on Rogers Avenue, and there he had a mikveh. So he said he's coming from there. But he said, I want to tell you that today the mikveh, something was wrong, must have been wrong with the heater. The mikveh was boiling, poshet boiling, that you could get burnt when you walk in. So he says he couldn't go in. But I want to tell you, he said, that when I was there, I saw the Rebbe come. It was 6 o'clock in the morning, he said, or before 6, said the Rebbe came and also tried to see if it's hot, and he saw it was poshet boiling. I mean, it was poshet boiling that you could poshet burn your skin off. And he says, and the Rebbe also didn't go in, and he left. So there we saw that the Rebbe goes to the mikveh on Shabbos over there by Rabbi Harlik's place early in the morning at 6 o'clock or whatever time it was, 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning.